This is John from Riverstone Audio. I'd like today to very briefly give an overview of Riverstone Audio's record level vertical tracking force gauge, both the calibration procedure as well as a very quick overview of measuring vertical tracking force. We now ship these in tin storage boxes, and you'll find inside some hints and general comments about measuring vertical tracking force, a detailed user's manual that discusses the gauge itself as well as adjusting tone arm, the vertical tracking force. All right. The gauge, the record level extension arm, and two precision calibration masses, a 5 gram and a 20 gram mass. So let's take the components out. And let me get things cleared up here. Okay. So again, the gauge and the record level extension arm. We ship these without batteries. It requires a AAA alkaline battery. So let me first show you how that goes in. It's the top side of the scale, top end of the scale, reverse side. Simply slide this parallel to the scale, grab an alkaline battery and use a new battery, and carefully put the plastic tab, you don't want to break it off, carefully put the plastic tab back underneath and slide again parallel. Alright, so we're ready to go. To take the cover off, you'll notice two indentations here. Hold the gauge top and bottom and just gently pull it off, and you can snap it back in to protect the strain sensor when you're done. Alright. Now this is the central loading platform. Beneath here is a precision strain gauge sensor, the strain gauge beam. This is a polymer pad, and you'll notice some lines on here, horizontal lines. Those essentially are guidelines when we place the extension arm on. I'll show that in a moment. The inner circle is for calibration with a 5 gram mass, just so you can better center it. The outer circle is a centering point for the 20 gram mass. Alright, you'll notice the same circles on the polymer pad at the end of the extension arm. The inner one for 5 gram mass, the outer one is to center the 20 gram mass when you go through the calibration. Alright. Okay, let's go through a typical calibration. And again, in the user's manual, we recommend that you recalibrate after placing on the extension arm. These come pre-calibrated, but the calibration can be affected by ambient temperature. Something important, when you calibrate though, make sure that there's no air currents from an open window, from a heater vent, an air conditioning vent, because that can influence the readings or the calibration. Power on through the on-off button, and I'm reading 0 grams as I should. You'll notice that this quickly blanks out. That's to conserve battery, but if you tap it, it comes back on. It has an auto-off feature after approximately 1 minute. Rest assured the gauge is active and ready to measure. Again, that's primarily we put in the circuit step primarily to conserve battery. Now, let's just check the calibration. Again, these are pre-calibrated, but ambient temperature can influence it. So let's just see how close we are. Well, that's fine. Alright, but again, we're going to want to go through a new calibration procedure when we put the extension arm on. So let me power this down. The way to power it down is you hold the on-off button until the screen blanks out. Let me press it. Blanked out, quickly released. It's powered down now. Alright, and if I tap it gently, it won't come back on. Let me go ahead and show you how the extension arm is attached, and let's calibrate it with the extension arm on. You'll notice, if you look at the central loading platform, 3 slots on both sides. And on the extension arm itself, you'll notice 2 slots, or 2 tabs rather, on one end. You also notice at the end of this screw another tab. Alright, and so these mate with the slots that are in the pan. All right. And what you typically would do, now it's more logical probably to put it on this side of the scale. All right, so I'll align these two tabs with those two slots and gently rotate. And when I say it's more logical, that's probably where you'll be taking your measurements. It's easier to view from this side. But if you want, you can indeed rotate to the other direction. All right, so let's go ahead and attach this. Again, line up those two tabs with those slots, gently rotate, and you don't want to put any excessive pressure on the central loading platform, so just gently hold this in place, and the reason is you can damage the sensor beneath here, the strain sensor. And again, what I'm doing is this tab goes into the central slot on this side, and very gently tighten it. You don't need any torque at all, just very gently. 5 gram mass isn't going to have any influence, this isn't going to move around. So again, don't over tighten because you may damage the sensor, just very gently. Okay, with the arm on, let's go through a calibration now. And again, this was previously calibrated with 20 grams. Let's check the calibration with the 5 gram mass. Again, when you're calibrating, make sure that you've got a, as I mentioned earlier, stable level environment, table rather, and make sure you're not breathing on it because even small air currents are enough to affect the calibration. All right, just simply blowing on it, or if you're talking, let's go ahead and see if we're okay or if we need to calibrate or not. That's the 5 gram mass. Let me stand back so I'm not breathing on it. We're actually okay as it is with the 5 gram mass, but again, it may or may not be, depending on ambient temperature. Also, there could be a slight influence because when you attach this arm, although we've got a very stiff beam, we designed it for a stiff beam, stiff plate, but there is a moment on the beam, and so that's why we always recommend recalibrating once the extension arm is on. But in this case, it's not any significant effect. Let's suppose we were reading outside the readability, which is 0.005. Let's suppose we read 5.02. We want to recalibrate. Let's go through that procedure. It's very quick with this scale. What you'll do is you'll press the on-off button, hold it down until you see a single 0. Release. Now you're going to wait until this flashes. This was previously calibrated for 20 gram mass. 20 gram mass. Now what we're going to do is press the unit button. We want to get to 5. A nice feature of this scale is you can calibrate for different ranges in 5 gram increments. So I could calibrate, for example, with an 80 gram mass. 85, 90, 95, 100, and 5. Alright, while the 5 is blinking, it blinks for maybe 15 seconds, so you have to be quick. Put this in the center circle, stand back so you're not breathing on it. And when the 5 comes back and the gram unit here is steady, it's calibrated, ready to go. Alright? Now before we actually make the measurement on the turntable, let me point out a few more features. Let me power this down for now. Okay. The distance from the surface, in this case this is turntable platter, to this depression, which is stamped into this extension arm, I've set this one for about 2.2 millimeters. You can actually change that. Never change it when the arm is attached. Remove the arm and you could gently bend it. So if I hold it here, I can gently bend that either up or down. So for example, if I've got, majority of my records are 1.4 millimeter, 120 gram record. I've seen them range from about 1.2 millimeter up to about 1.8 millimeter in thickness. And if the majority of my records happen to be 1.6, well, I might very well adjust this so that the distance is closer to 1.5 or 1.6. Some of the pressings that may be 180 gram, we can get up to 2.8 gram. That's one of the features of this, is that you can tweak it a little bit if need be. It's not that important. You know, if you're within 0.5 millimeter or 1 millimeter, you'll be fine. Let's go ahead and put this back on. But again, never adjust it when this is actually attached, or you'll damage the precision strain sensor. Alright, so let me go ahead and stick that back in. Oops, I didn't get the tab locked in. Okay, very gently, and again, don't press on the central loading platform. I'm again parallel. I'm ready to go. Okay, let's go to the turntable. This is an older Victor turntable out of Japan. Let's go ahead and space this out. Now the reason I'm using this business card is I think you're probably aware that depending upon the bearings, the type of bearing that you've got in the tone arm, as well as the age of the turntable, the tracking force, vertical tracking force, can change with radial position from the outer radius to the inner radius of the record. So you want to be consistent. In my case, I just take a standard reference, one business card away to the edge of here. That's fine. That's what I'm going to use from now on. You can also, if you want to be more precise, just pull out some calipers and go from the spindle to some point. Okay. I found this is probably the easiest way to do it. All right, let's go ahead and power on. And because I have a habit of sometimes knocking into the table, the platter rather, let me just take a sticky note, stick it under, and try to stabilize that a little bit. Okay? All right, that's just so there's no accidents when I'm setting this up. All right, now let me go ahead and center. And you got to look at this in two different directions. And again, what I'm doing is trying to center this within the bullseye. Let me pull this arm back away for a moment, just to make one comment. The closer you get to the bullseye, the better, but it turns out because I've got a relatively stiff beam here that this cantilever arm is attached to, the strain sensor, anywhere within this inner circle here is fine. You won't get any difference in reading, all right, on this polymer pad. So, but probably the closer to the center, if it makes you feel better, do it that way. All right, so in two different directions, it looks like I'll be centered. Let me bring this down and try to use the dash pot if possible. Bring it down gently. All right, and again, the gauge is still active up to 1 minute before it auto powers down. Let me just double check that my alignment's okay. Okay, great. I'm within that center circle. For this particular MC cartridge, the recommended manufacturer recommended 2.2 grams. I'm pretty close. With a range, again, you have to tweak it for your particular system. Some people may feel you get better sound quality if you're at 2 gram, because remember that each of these cartridges, although they're precision cartridges, either the MC or the MM, there are no two cartridges that are identical. And so there's a range. In this case, this has something like 1.8 to 2.4 gram is the range. The recommended to starting point is roughly 2.2. All right, so I'm at 2.19. So again, if I want to tweak it a little bit, go back to the counterweight, and let me add just a little bit of mass. Bring it back down. .205, 2.2. Again, make sure you're not breathing on the scale. So you may want to take a few repeat measurements. There's also what's referred to as slipstick friction if you studied friction and wear in the past. So you can also get slightly different readings depending upon the quality of the bearings or the age of the bearings. Well, this one looks pretty consistent. This Victor turntable has been well maintained, although it's decades old now. All right. And let me take a third. You can just take the average of those. Okay, so I feel quite happy about this one. Now, as I mentioned earlier, with radial position, you can get a different reading. So if I were to bring this in a little bit closer, and again, that's due to friction, the different friction with different position of the bearing as I move the arm. And let me bring this down. All right, pretty darn close. Again, this was a well-maintained table. All right. So I think the point is try to choose a consistent point where you take the measurement. One other thing I'd like to point out is that there's a lot of flexibility with this, as I mentioned earlier. You can flip this around, put it on the other side if you want to take a measurement here, for example. So there's a lot of flexibility in what you can do with this arm. Again, you can tweak it, very gently bend, up or down if you want to change the height. And then you may want to make sure you have a card under here. You can slip a card under here that you've got enough sufficient clearance to take the measurement. All right, what I'll do in a future video is give a few more details about setting up the tone arm, a few more comments about the importance of correct vertical tracking force, and we'll also a brief discussion of vertical tracking angle. So I hope you enjoyed the video. Thank you.